Welcome to today's edition of the Rush 24/7 podcast.
Of course not. We're not going to jip Obama. We're not going to join Obama's speech. What do you mean, are we going to jip Obama? Jip means join in progress in broadcast lingo. No, we're not going to do that. We're rolling tape on it. And if there's anything newsworthy in there, we'll say it. You want to make a bet whether he mentions the word Trump or not? Say he doesn't. I think he wants to go there. We'll see, though. Anyway, greetings, my friends. Welcome. Hope you had a great weekend. Rush Limbaugh here, ready and rocking and rolling for broadcast excellence. 3 hours straight ahead. The telephone number is 800-282-2882. If you want to appear on the program as a caller, if so, remember, the purpose of calls and callers is to make the host look good. But that doesn't mean that you call in and just consistently praise me. What that means is that callers are supposed to inspire and ignite the host into further area of inquiry and expertise. And that's what we look for. If you want to send an email, you can do that, lrushbo@eibnet.us. Okay, now, folks, I need to beg your indulgence here at the beginning for a couple of things. We're going to get into everything that's in the news out there today. The French election, particularly, you might think, well, come on, what do we need? You'd be amazed at the similarities, demographically, structurally, politically, what's happening in France and in the United States. And you're going to be amazed at the political coalitions that have sprung up in France that in many ways mirror exactly what's happening in the United States. The big difference is that Marine Le Pen is not Donald Trump. And the guy that came in number one in the runoff, Macron or Macroni or whatever his name is, do you know that his wife is 25 years older than he is? He met her. He was a student at age 15, and some teacher of his, well, they got married. She's 25 years older. She's 64. He's 39 or something like that. He'd be the youngest president, prime minister, premier, whatever they call him, dictator of France. I'm just joking about dictator. But if he wins, he's going to be the youngest ever. But the establishment in France lost, which is it's kind of, you have two anti-establishment candidates running there, Marine Le Pen and this guy. This guy edged her out by 2 points, 23% of the vote. She got 21. The experts are all saying it's over then. He wins the runoff on May 7th. Not so sure about this. And by the way, Obama called this guy Macron and weighed in and helped him, and Macron turned a phone call into a campaign ad. I thought the Democrats were opposed to foreign intervention in elections. Anyway, we're going to do all that. We got polling data from the Washington Post that not everybody, a lot of people are missing the lead in this poll. The Washington Post wants you to think that Trump's approval numbers are tanking and everything's going south. And the big news is that if the election were held again, Trump would win again, and Hillary would lose again. And a greater number of people are upset and think the Democrat Party's out of touch than think the Republican Party's out of touch. But you have to dig deep in the Washington Post or ABC News stories on that to get it. So we'll get into that. Democrat Party... Crazy Bernie says the model isn't working. We need to do it over. Tom Perez, the new chairman DNC, run around cussing every fourth or fifth word. The Democrats had a pro-Democrat rally under the guise of science over the weekend. We're going to get into everything, but there are two things that I need to beg your indulgence on. First is one of the longest-term employees here at the EIB network, Kathleen Gleason-Preyes, popularly known here as Cookie. She was one of the executive producers at Rush Limbaugh, the TV show, when it began in 1992. And she stayed with us when the TV show ended. You know, in 29 years, I can count on one hand the number of people who have left. And I don't think any of them have been fired. They've either all gone on to other things or they have retired. And Kathleen's a long-termer. What her primary responsibility are two things: executive assistant, and she is the producer of all the audio soundbites. She is the woman who watches all of this network garbage so that I don't have to. And she assembles all of the audio sound bites that you hear, and many that you don't, simply because I don't get to them all. But it's a 24/7 job that she engages in tirelessly. Her mother passed away last week in her 80s, and Kathleen and her mother were extremely close. Her mother's name was Joan. And this woman, I have to tell you, I met her on a number of occasions. It's amazing to me, folks, whenever I meet the mothers of people who work here, they all treat me as one of their kids, too. No matter how old I am, I'm always treated as one of the kids, and I'm always warned to treat all the other kids nicely. In other words, don't you dare mistreat my daughter. Now, she doesn't say it that way. It's all good-natured. That's the whole point. It's all family-like. And Kathleen's mother, I just want to tell you a little bit about her. She's a great lady in every sense of the word. She was, the prototype for the kind of person this country was built by and built on and sustained by. And as America evolves, there are fewer and fewer of these people. It's a generational thing. There are fewer and fewer people like Joan Gleason. And it's, as I say, it's just generational. Joan Gleason, for example, was intimately aware of the Constitution, the nation's founding, all of the values that came from the founding, raised her family with them. Today, you'd have to do a deep survey to find out how many Americans even know the Constitution, know of it, or very much about it. But she was one of the solid foundational building blocks of her family and of the country. And there are fewer and fewer people like her today. She was a standout. Over 1,000 people are expected to attend her wake and funeral this week in New Jersey. That's just mind-boggling for someone who's not a public figure and who doesn't live in a large metropolitan area. But I just wanted to acknowledge her life and her death this week and the profound effect that it's had on her family. Kathleen has borne up well under it. There's so much love there that she had for her mother and vice versa, that it's an irreplaceable, understandably irreplaceable loss. The undeniable truth, however, is that all of our parents, particularly our mothers, for biological and anthropological reasons, our mothers live on. Their hearts are in ours. And in Kathleen's case and her mother, Kathleen is an extension of her mother, and in Kathleen, her mother will live on. And I just wanted to take a brief moment here to acknowledge this, because it's a sad and devastating moment. At the same time, it's conflicting, because Christianity, this is a happy time, you hope. And that's the faith. And Mrs. Gleason led a life of such repute that infinite rewards should be hers. And I wanted to make sure that we acknowledge this today, because I consider all of you in this audience to be an extended family. And you've heard the name Cookie banded about here constantly over these years. She's been out the past month caring for her mother. And it's not the same when she isn't here. And that's not meant to slight anybody else. The second such instance is Cato Byrne. Cato Byrne of National Review and a number of think tanks passed away over the weekend. Now, let me tell you about Cato Byrne. She was one of the godmothers of the modern so-called conservative movement. And explaining Cato Byrne, I need to go back to the very beginning of this program. I haven't talked about it in this context much lately. At the beginning, when this program started in '88, it was more a central topic. But you have to remember something. For the impact of Cato Byrne on me to be understood, you have to understand who I was in 1988. And in terms of Cato Byrne and everybody in the so-called conservative movement in Washington and New York, I was nobody. Nobody had ever heard of me. I am a loner. I'm not a networker. I do not try to get to know people so they can do something for me down the road. I'm just totally self-focused on my own merit, and I've always believed that my work will speak for me and itself. And I have not sought relationships with people in the same business I'm in or any other business in hopes that someday they'll be able to do something for me. I just have never thought in that regard, perhaps because it didn't happen much that I saw when we were growing up. But I've always just considered it part of being self-responsible, that whatever happens to me is because of me. Not saying nobody helped. That's the whole point. Now, in 1988, you have to remember there's no conservatism nationally other than, National Review magazine. And that wasn't really national. It was the three networks and CNN and the Washington Post and New York Times. That was the media. USA Today had just popped up. CNN was the only thing outside the three networks that had started in 1980, so it was 8 years old, and it was on cable. And it was a much different CNN then from the CNN that you know today. So the conservative movement of that era didn't know what to make of me. The conservative movement has been burned many times over the decades by people who they thought were conservative, invested in them, and it turned out that they were weak, not like-minded, and eventually faded and ended up either ignoring, betraying, or walking away from conservatism. And so there were people at arm's length about that. Nobody mistreated me, none of the sort. It's just, it was a natural instinct. Who is this guy? Okay, so this is a conservative, but is this going to help us or hurt us? This guy on the radio is doing weird things. He's cracking jokes about liberals, and I don't know if we want to be associated with this. But they did, and they didn't, and they did, and they didn't. And some reached out, and Cato Byrne was one of those who did. And I can give you the names if you want, but there were many people who reached out to me and invited me to where they work, at their magazines or their think tanks, to give me miniature lectures on their area of expertise, be it welfare reform, poverty, be it environmental wackoism, whatever, media, whatever their area of expertise. They all sat me down, and Bill Bennett was instrumental in facilitating some of this. They were very cautious because they, again, had no idea who I was and standoffish a little bit. They were, on one hand, thrilled and excited that somebody had come along that was articulating what they had been writing and speaking of and slaving away over in basements, in crowded rooms, trying to get published here and there. And here comes some guy who they've never heard of, espousing things they believe in. And so it was a mixed bag. They wanted it all to be legit, but because of betrayal and an image, frankly, that some people had of anything not on television, they were standoffish. Cato Byrne was none of that. She was one of the people I met. This was, by the way, it's not an organized thing. It just happened. And one day I'd get a call from Robert Richter saying, yeah, you want to learn a little bit what we do here in media analysis, and then Brent Bozell, same thing at Media Research Center. And this process took a couple of years. There was nothing organized about it. It was just an evolution that happened, for which I was profoundly grateful. And I remember when the program started, I frequently named and cited the people whose work I had used to help me understand why I thought and believed the things that I thought and believed. And in this tour, I'll call it, I met Cato Byrne, and she was immediately accepting and friendly, outgoing, extroverted, ribald, whatever struck her is the way she behaved. She was brilliant. She was cooperative, and she was very shepherding in my process. It's 1988, Bush and Dukakis, third term of Reagan. There is no national conservative media. Everybody in the accepted conservative movement knows everybody else in it, and here I came. And she was openly accepting and just thoroughly encouraging and very helpful. And I tracked her career as after I met her, she started showing up doing more television like Crossfire and the McLaughlin Group. And she was one of the early conservative women who just had a spine of steel. She was fearless. She had it combined with a tremendous and great sense of humor. And I've always said, folks, that I love getting older. I have never feared getting older. I have, and I've always been, in my own life, borne out that's been true. The next year has been better than the previous. When I was 15, I wanted to be 21. I wanted to get all this childhood, teenage stuff out of the way. I wanted to get successful. I wanted to get on the track. I wanted to get moving. And as I looked at life, everybody older than me seemed really happy, really self-sufficient, really this, really, and I had that as a goal. And it's always been true. There has not been a year that I have regretted getting older yet, except for things like this. The unavoidable reality that once you hit your 60s, the news is going to be more frequent, that your friends and acquaintances are sick, ill, and have passed away. That's the one unavoidable downside of getting older. But you know, I've always had a belief that nostalgia has a unique way of only, at least in my case, nostalgia for me is never negative. It's always positive. When I think about the past and remember things, people that I've met and meant a lot to me, it's always positive. It's always uplifting. Never is any of it negative. Never is there any anguish about it. And it's that way with Kate O'Byrne. And I know she leaves a lot of people in the sense of loss and pain today at National Review and in her family. But I wanted to acknowledge both of these women because they have been deeply impactful on me and my life to my vast betterment. Joan Gleason and Kate O'Byrne. We'll take a break. We'll come back after this. Don't go. A short segment here because I went over my time limit in the original segment. I just want to add one little tidbit to the Washington Post ABC News poll that they ran on Trump and the election and what would happen if you do it again. In the rerun, if the election were held today, not only would Trump win 43-40 or 46-30, one of the two, Trump would win the popular vote. If the election were held, and this book on the Hillary campaign, folks, it is so bad, this campaign and this candidate and the Clintons. It is so bad, even New York magazines are begging the Clintons to just take Chelsea home and go away. I meant to mention something that I neglected, and to me, it's about Kathleen Cookie. She was really proud of her mother. I don't know. I don't know about you. I know a lot of people. It's natural. Something about occasionally your mom or dad embarrasses you. You know, especially when you're a teenager and so forth. But with her, it was stunning. She admired. Her mother was a role model for just had so much respect and admiration, and so proud of her mother. And it's a really, really deep loss because they had such an ongoing deep connection. And I neglected to mention that it's an important aspect and characteristic to this. It's an enviable one, too, to have that kind of pride and respect and admiration for your parents. That's a gift. Now, ladies and gentlemen, on the French election, I'm going to get to it in due course. I've spent a lot of time, I don't know why, over the weekend I wanted to find out about this. In most cases, you learn enough to be able to be conversant in it, but I wanted to find out what this was really going on because I wanted to get beyond the American media coverage of this and find out what the real truths on the ground are in France about this election. Because I just don't trust the media. I just don't. Everything is written through the prism of how it can hurt Trump, how it can help Obama, how it can help the Democrat agenda. For example, what I'm talking about is this. Macron, the young wonderkin that's supposed to be the next leader of France, is described as a moderate centrist independent. That's how he is constantly referred to in the American media. Marine Le Pen, who would be, for our purposes here, the Donald Trump comparison, is always referred to as the extremist right-winger. Every drive-by article about the French election describes Emmanuel Macron as an independent centrist and Marine Le Pen as an extreme right-winger. Now, let me tell you, the only reason, and I want you to file this away for later in the program, and I circle back to the French election, because there are things here I want to get to first, but I just want to get a little foundation built here. The only reason that Emmanuel Macron is pretending to be a centrist is because his real party is the Socialist Party, which is the American, it's a Democrat party there, but it is so unpopular. The Socialist Party in France is so unpopular that Francois Hollande, the current president and socialist, didn't dare run for re-election. 50% of the electorate is opposed to the European Union. You will never learn that when you watch coverage of the election from Saturday in France or Sunday. You will think that because this guy won, that France is going to reject Brexit and wants to go all in on a unified Europe, and it's not the case. So what happened here is that Emmanuel Macron left the Socialist Party. He is a socialist. He is the equivalent of an American Democrat. He started his own party, of which he's the only member, just to ditch the baggage that would accrue to him of being in the Socialist Party. And so he is characterized as a moderate centrist, and when he's not, he's an ultra left-wing rabid socialist. So when I saw that kind of mischaracterization, misdirection, and cover-up, I wanted to dig deep and find out what's going on. And I'm going to tell you, you're going to be stunned when you find out how similar things are in France, demographically, culturally, politically. And you're going to find, some of it is going to blow your mind. But let me give you one little tidbit. In the middle of the 20th century, France built a lot of public housing. And it was, half the population was to live in this public housing. It was 5 million units of public housing, which is now 1/6 of all households in France. 5 million public housing units, 1/6. It's ugly. It is hideous looking, but it is more or less affordable. But it was originally built for the working class of France, the white working class. They are gone. They don't live in this public housing. It is all Muslim now. The white working class has been rejected by the French Democrat Party, just as Obama rejected the white working class here. It's stunning. The Socialist Party in France has decided to do exactly what the Democrat, and I don't know who did it first. I'm not saying they're copying us. The Social Democrats, the Socialist Democrats in France, have decided on a coalition of immigrants and minorities everywhere they can find them. And the so-called white working class, which this public housing was built for, has been dispatched and is no longer part of the political coalition of the Socialist Democrats in France. It's identical to what the Democrats did here. That's just one similarity. So in time, we'll circle back to that. Now, to the polling data on Trump, because the drive-bys are going just gaga over this, and there's things in it that actually are very depressing and disappointing to them. For example, Washington Post poll. You have to dig deep to find this. They do not highlight it. It's an ABC Washington Post poll. Washington Post doesn't highlight this. The ABC reporting doesn't highlight this. What they're claiming that their poll shows is that Donald Trump is the least popular president in modern times. That's the lead. That's the focus. Trump's approval number, all-time low, modern times, new president, end of 100-day honeymoon, blah, blah, blah. You have to read all the way to the second to last paragraph to learn that Donald Trump, with the lowest approval ratings and the highest unpopularity in the modern era, would still beat Hillary Clinton if the election were held today. And not just the Electoral College, he would win the popular vote. Second to last paragraph of a long story that had shown that Clinton would still lose despite high disapproval ratings and problems with his first 100 days, detailed by the paper. It says the new survey finds 46% saying they voted for Clinton, 43% said they voted for Trump. And that might be fairly close to accurate if you acknowledge that these polling results represent the popular vote back in November. And that's similar to Hillary's 2-point national vote margin in the actual election. Asked how, the same respondents, it was 1,004 people, asked how they would vote if the election were held today. 43% said they would vote Trump. 40% said they would vote Clinton. Jonathan Karl of ABC News was so disturbed by this that he tweeted, according to our poll among 2016 voters, Trump would beat Hillary in a rematch in the popular vote, no less. They can't believe it. You know why they can't? They think they're this close to destroying Trump. Look at what they've done. Look at the multi-billions of dollars arrayed against Trump every day in the form of news coverage. If you had to go by, if the Democrat Party had to go by the amount of negative reporting on Donald Trump, it would reach into the tens of billions of dollars. A full 93% of reporting in the drive-by media has been unfavorable to Trump. And still, he would trounce Hillary again if the election were held today. Here's another thing buried in this poll that you have to dig deep to find. 67% of Americans say the Democrat Party is out of touch with their concerns. You remember in 2012, the exit poll from that election, the 5 o'clock wave, when I saw that, knew it was over. There was a question to the exit on the exit poll of voters, and it something along the lines of, cares about people like me. Obama won that 89-11 over Romney. And then I saw another question that 60% still blame Bush for the economy. I knew it was over. Well, this is quite a plunge. When you have, in 2012, people acknowledging that the Democrat Party is in touch with them and understands their needs and cares about people like them, to now 67% think the Democrat Party is out of touch. The Republican Party, it's around 53. Don't misunderstand. Both parties are in the 30s in terms of in touch, care about me. But the Democrat Party is where the gigantic plunge has taken place here. 67% say the Democrats are out of touch with their concerns. And again, you have to dig deep to find this. And the same poll. New polls show low approval numbers for Trump, but almost no regrets among his voters. Despite all the questions about whether many of Trump's voters have buyer's remorse, only 2% of the people said they voted for president regret their decision. You know how you know this is true? If there were even some regret, that's all we'd be seeing in the media. Every panel show in prime time on MSNBC and CNN would feature panels of disappointed, angry Trump voters. They can't find them. Only 2% have any regrets. Remember, this is the group of people that continues to prop Trump up. By the way, Trump gave, I was shocked when I saw this. He sat down with Julie Pace, who is the commie babe reporter for the AP. He sat down in an expansive interview, a long interview with her. And you know what? When you read these things, you know, I've always said, and I've always told people that you need to know how to listen to Trump. I do. There is nobody in American media who understands Donald Trump and can explain Donald Trump better than your host, the Maharishi. And I'm telling you, he gives, she thought she was nailing him on a question about the Chinese no longer being currency manipulators. She really thought she was going to expose him as a hypocrite and saying things he doesn't mean, so she raises the question, how come the Chinese are not currency manipulators? I mean, 2 weeks ago they were horrible. All during your campaign they were horrible. Now you're saying they're not currency manipulators. And his answer just blows her out of the water. And it's exactly what I told you his answer would be last week. And the interview is filled with things when you read it. This is pretty smart. This is actually very clever. And you get the impression that, in this case, Julie Pace is unable to keep up. And I think this is what Trump voters and supporters instinctively know about the guy. They respect what they consider to be his intelligence. They respect what they consider to be his devotion to them and what he believes. You know, Trump is in a little bit of trouble. He talked to an International Space Station female astronaut. And she mentioned to him that they're working on a process to transform urine into pure drinking water. And Trump said, well, better you than me. And the Twitter sphere is just outraged at Trump insensitivity and mean-spiritedness and reluctance to encourage her. And he was telling a joke. And they don't get it. And when it comes to sense of humor, they don't have one. Look, I'm way long. Got to take a break. Back with more after this. Sit tight. Great to have you here. By the way, Dean up the web, Dean's Coco Jr. today. Dean, I need you to research. I need to search the site. I need you to find the first instance where I told everybody that millennials do not even want to pay for Netflix. They hate Comcast, they hate AT&T, they hate telecoms and cable companies. They hate it because they have to pay for it. Because I'm right again. You find it, let me know, Dean. I'm going to make a big deal about it at RushLimbaugh.com. From Market Watch, most millennials don't want to pay for Netflix. Right here it is. Don't ever doubt me. Even when you think it can't possibly be true, or you don't even know why I'm mentioning it, don't doubt me. We start on the phones in Dodge, Nevada. This is David. It's great to have you up first today, sir. How you doing?
Thank you for taking my call, Rush. It's always a great day when I get to speak to Mr. Snerdley, and even better when I get to speak to you.
Thank you, sir, very much.
All of these approval and disapproval polls are a joke, because if you say you approve of something, you're in that group A. There's no variance, within limits. When you say you disapprove of Congress, of a president, of whatever, you may disapprove of them because they're doing too much, doing things you don't want done, or you may disapprove because they're not doing enough. They're not going fast enough with the things you want. They can take a 40% group that says they approve and a 30% group that disapproves because they don't like the guy, a 30% group that disapproves because he's not going fast enough, and make it look like 60% disapprove.
This is actually very shrewd. This is actually very perceptive, and this is actually a very, very good point, David. And I'll tell you why it matters. Because I think in the case of Trump, I think the media does, as he says, disapproval equals dislike. Disapproval equals regret. I voted for the guy. Disapproval, that's what they want you to mean. But you know, I know, there are people who are not happy with Trump because he's not moving fast enough on things. There are people who expected tax reform and Obamacare to be well on the road to being completed by now. There are people who thought that we'd be further along down the line on building the wall and immigration. I'm not suggesting anything other than his point is correct. That disapproval doesn't mean opposition and dislike. It can also mean that people wish the guy were doing more. And it's, I think in Trump's case, that is highly relevant. I'm glad you called. Thanks much. We'll be back. We've got more, as we always do. All right, get this. This is the second time I've seen this. Psychiatrists at Yale University. Quote, I've worked with murderers and rapists. I can recognize dangerousness from a mile away. You don't have to be an expert on dangerousness or spend 50 years studying it like I have in order to know how dangerous Donald Trump is. Yale psychiatrists. Never examined him. It's just the left is cracking up. They're literally crumbling to shreds. The views expressed by the host of this program documented to be almost always right, 99.8% of the time. Great to have you with us. If you want to be on the program, the phone number is 800-282-2882, and the email address is lrushbo at eibnet.us. Hang up. I just now got it printed out. Let me give you the headline here on this. It's a Daily Caller story. Ready for this? Former Obama official, bureaucrats manipulate client stats to influence policy. No kidding. Exactly. But this looks like somebody from the Obama regime is owning up to it. In a sense, saying, we've all been lied to about this. I just printed it out. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I'm one of the fastest digesters of news there is out there. So I'll digest this really fast, as a fast digester does, and I'll get you the details in the next segment, I promise. You see this March for Science over the weekend? You know, how absurd. It wasn't a march for science. It was another anti-Trump, pro-Democrat Party rally is all it was. And it's trying to unite people who accept the politicized values of science. Everywhere I look, I see the Democrat Party flailing away, not connecting. I'm telling you, if it weren't for the drive-by media, and that's a big, big part of this. If it weren't for the drive-by media, if the media were just, let's put it this way, if the media were 40%, 30% less partisan than it is, if they were only 60% all in for the Democrats would be in deep, deep doo-doo. The only thing that is keeping the Democrat Party alive and viable is the media, and the media is lying to everybody. I think one of the reasons why so many college students and Democrats and leftists are genuinely unhinged is they believe the BS that passes for the news every day. They believe it. They treat it as gospel, and the media lied to them about the Clinton campaign. The media lied to them about the polling of the presidential election. The media is lying to them about the electoral strength and potential of the Democrat Party. They're just misrepresenting things, and they are lying to them about various characteristics and personality traits of Donald Trump, and they're creating an entire portion of this country that is clinically on the road to insanity, or just shy of it. I mean, this little tidbit here from Yale. This is incredible. Yale psychiatrists just warned that there is something seriously wrong with Donald Trump. Let me read this again. They're the words of James Gilligan, psychiatrist and professor at New York University. And he's talking about Trump. I've worked with murderers and rapists. I can recognize dangerousness from a mile away. You don't have to be an expert on dangerousness or spend 50 years studying it like I have in order to know how dangerous this man is. Now, this guy's comments were one of many from a group of psychiatrists who gathered at Yale School of Medicine last Thursday. The message presented was that Donald Trump is mentally unfit to be in the White House. Didn't Hillary Clinton try that already? Yes, she did. She did. Mentally unfit was damn well part of what she meant. Unstable, unfit, not the right temperament. This is all they've got. They cannot even take Trump to town on policy. They try to, but they lose on virtually every prospect that comes up, except in their citadels, like New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles. Dr. John Gartner, practicing psychiatrist and founding member of Duty to Warn, which is a group of several dozen mental health professionals who feel it's their obligation to inform the public about the president's mental state, say the warning signs have been there from the beginning. Worse than just being a liar or a narcissist. In addition, Trump is paranoid, delusional, suffers grandiose thinking, and he proved that to the country the first day he was president. Proved all that the first day he was president. This guy, Gartner, started a petition calling for Trump to be removed from office earlier this year. It has 47,000 signatures, which is not many, folks, compared to how hard they're working to get them and how long the effort has been underway. While we're on the subject of psychiatrists, let me find something. Yes! This is a story from Life Site News. Thaddeus Beklinski is the writer here. A prominent Toronto psychiatrist has severely criticized the assumptions underlying what has been dubbed by critics as the Canadian federal government's bathroom bill, which up there is called Bill C-279. It's a private member's bill that would afford special protection to so-called transgender men and women. The prominent Toronto psychiatrist is Dr. Joseph Berger, and he has issued a statement saying that from a medical and scientific perspective, there is no such thing as a transgendered person, and that terms such as gender expression and gender identity used in the Canadian bill are at the very least ambiguous and are more an emotional appeal than a statement of scientific fact. Dr. Joseph Berger, who is a consulting psychiatrist in Toronto and whose list of credentials establishes him as an expert in the field of mental illness, stated that people who identify themselves as transgendered are mentally ill or simply unhappy. And he pointed out that hormone therapy and surgery are not appropriate treatments for psychosis and unhappiness. He said, from a scientific perspective, let me clarify what transgendered actually means. I'm speaking now about the scientific perspective, not any political lobbying position that may be proposed by any group, medical or non-medical. Transgendered are people who claim that they really are or wish to be people of the sex opposite to which they were born or to which their chromosomal configuration attests. Sometimes some of these people have claimed that they are a woman trapped in a man's body, or alternatively a man trapped in a woman's body. The medical treatment of delusions, psychosis, or emotional happiness is not surgery. Now, he's not the first. The emeritus head of the mental illness psychiatry department at Johns Hopkins University has written and published and said the same thing. And I remember reporting it when he did say it. It's going on now to over a year. And I thought, shortly after I read on this program what he said, that there would be hell to pay. And there wasn't any reaction to it that I was made aware of, which is unusual. I mean, normally when you voice the words of a scientist critical of a popular left-wing notion of the day, they come out of the woodwork and go nuts and try to discredit whoever it is that is saying it and whoever is passing it on. In this case, it would have been me passing it on. Not a word. It's stunning. And he said the exact same thing as this guy's saying. It's a mental illness. We need to treat these people with compassion. We don't need to be performing surgery on them. This is not, you can't cure mental illness with surgery. You can't cure delusions with surgery. And he went further and actually assigned blame to the entire culture here for promoting this. Well, now, why do you think that happens? Because it's a voting block for the Democrat Party. That's why it's been politicized. And it has been politicized and lumped in with the gay movement. LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. And you know, when the militant gay community succeeded, as they did, in redefining the term marriage, what was there left to protest? What was there left to get? So they adopted the transgender movement as the next focus of discrimination and mistreatment mean-spiritedness, extremism, what have you, and have become big champions. And it is this type of minority that the Democrat Party has overthrown white working-class voters for, and instead is trying to amass a voting coalition made up of all these minorities, but they can't win doing that. They're a little bit ahead of the game. The demographic shift that everybody has been eagerly anticipating, that being when whites are no longer the minority of America, that's still some years off if current trends can. They just got a head start on it, and they miscalculated. And the Democrats just admitted that they were casting aside white working-class voters, which in many cases had used to be their base. They call their base blue-collar, but white working-class Americans, many of them were union members. Many of them had voted Democrat. These are the famous Reagan Democrats that Reagan also converted. So here's a group of psychiatrists claiming Trump is dangerous and unfit for office, and we have another one in Canada saying that transgenderism is a mental illness and it's a delusion, and it doesn't need to be treated politically as a minority, and it certainly doesn't need to be treated with surgery. I mentioned that Trump told a joke that the Twitterverse got livid, the left-wing Twitterverse, livid and outraged about, and it's this. Soundbite 26. International Space Station, the astronaut Peggy Whitson. Trump spoke to her to congratulate her on a new space flight record. She's now lived more than 534 days in space. During her lifetime, more cumulative days in space than any other American. Not consecutive, but cumulative. 534 days. And during the discussion, Trump says, I know so much research is done. I'm getting a glimpse of some of it right here in the Oval Office. What are we learning by being in space? Here's what Peggy Whitson said.
The International Space Station is providing a key bridge from us living on Earth to going somewhere into deep space. So on those Mars missions, we need to better understand how microgravity is really affecting our body, and we need to understand it in great detail. So many of the studies are looking at the human body. Water is such a precious resource up here that we also are cleaning up our urine and making it drinkable, and it's really not as bad as it sounds.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. Better you than me.
It's a joke. They actually think that Trump is being disrespectful and putting her down. I'm telling you, one of the problems we have in America today is the left has been rendered so insane and so unhinged that they're not capable of laughing. Have you ever seen... other than when you watch a left-wing comedy show, and they're really not laughing, they're applauding the mean-spiritedness of left-wing comedy these days. But it's not happy laughter. It's not. You want another example of the media lying to people? Have you heard about what's going on in Venezuela? Let me tell you just briefly. Venezuela, as you know, a totally socialist country that was run into the ground by Hugo Chavez and his successor. Despite being an oil-rich country, they are flat broke. They don't have any. It's worse than the Soviet Union didn't have food in the grocery stores on the shelves. Do you know that the average Venezuelan has lost 20 pounds this year because of starvation? They simply can't get food. MSNBC said that they are losing weight because an oil company there donated $500,000 to Trump, and people are outraged. I know you're saying, what, Rush? What? Yep, that essentially is it. $500,000 that could have gone to feeding the people of Venezuela instead went to a campaign donation to Donald Trump. It is socialism that fails everywhere. Venezuela happens to be the latest postmark case of it, that the left is in total denial. Remember all those Hollywood actors, Sean Penn and these other clowns that go down there and shake hands with Chavez? Nobody can understand it, and you can't now. And that's an example of the drive-by media lying to people in this country that renders them angry and unhinged to the point that, this is, wait, you're converting urine to water and you're drinking, better you than me. It's outrageous. How dare he speak that way to an actor? How dare he put her down? How dare he disrespect her? And they just do not have a sense. Same thing with Jeff Sessions talking about some island judge standing in the way of Trump's executive order. Oh, they blew their gas. Racism, bigotry, homophobia, whatever it is they want to level the charge at. You know, they've been charging these things, so many people, it's getting to the point now where the charge is baseless. If everybody's racist, if everybody's a bigot, if everybody's a homophobe, if everybody's all of these things all the time, then we're nearing the point where the allegation is simply going to be laughed at. Back after this, folks. Don't go away. James in Lake Tahoe. Great to have you on the program. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, Rush. Thanks a lot. You know, you really nailed it during the first segment there, describing the French political scene. And it really is true that the way they are using the language in French, which I used to live in France, that the way that they describe Le Pen in the media, even in France, is as an extremist and so forth, and calling it a catastrophe that Le Pen might win, which is all fake, as you're saying. The only thing that Macron is saying that is typically what Democrats or socialists do, that is a conservative type of thing, is Macron is saying that he wants to lower taxes. But everything else is completely from the Democrat playbook. And even the slogan for Macron's political party, En Marche, means forward in French, just like forward for Hillary Clinton. It's the same slogan.
Was it forward or lean in? Oh, wait, lean in was Sheryl Sandberg.
There's different ways to translate it, but you would translate it as forward. I'm not sure Hillary's slogan, but the slogan En Marche would mean forward or going forward.
Right.
The other thing is the leftists in France do not accept elections. The same thing that you've been saying over the past few weeks, they don't. There have been riots breaking out. They do not accept the elections. They take whatever they believe that they want to have, and they're going to keep on pressing for that no matter what.
Well, leftists are leftists, so wherever you go. It's not just, that's the point of trying to explain this to people. You're right. It's not just in the United States that leftists behave as they do. It's worldwide. And it's all related to globalism. In France, this election, in many ways, was portrayed as globalism, which is great and wonderful, versus nationalism, populism, which is, of course, horrible. And it's short-sighted. Very, very, very bad. And the reason the argument is happening in France is the same reason that it's happening here. And that is the elites in France are doing very well. And the elites in France are benefiting and doing great because of their close attachments to the economic advances that are made possible by globalism. And there are some of those, but there are also very large downsides to it. And in France, as in the United States, the downsides to globalism is that native, in America it's kind of a tough definition, but the beneficiaries of globalism in both the United States, the non-elite beneficiaries are illegal immigrants here and immigrants in France. And it's illustrated by the fact that 1/6 of public housing, 1/6 of housing in France is public, built by the government for French citizens. Now none of them live in it. It's all occupied by immigrants and primarily Muslims. And so these people have been displaced. They're French. They've been displaced, and they feel like they have been forgotten. They cannot afford to live in Paris, for instance. They can't work there. There's nothing for them. Since we had the phone call from the man who is intimately aware of the French situation with this election, let's get into it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but I think you'll be fascinated with the similarities. What's happening in France, what's happening here. Not saying that they are copying us. It's just leftists are leftists wherever they go, and they are not people that respect nation states and borders and boundaries. They are actually, the leftists are the actual one-worlders. globalist, massive, gigantic, worldwide welfare state. It's insane. But that's largely what we're up against. Now, again, I just want to give you a brief explanation of terms so that you know who we're talking about. The two top vote getters are both considered outside the French establishment. In other words, neither a Republican nor a Democrat won, if you analogize it to the United States. But that's not altogether true. The top vote getter was Emmanuel Macron, who's 35, whose wife is 25 years older than he is. He met her when he was 15. She was a teacher. He was a student. He is a former member of the Socialist or Socialiste Party in France, which is so unpopular that the current president, Francois Hollande, did not even run for re-election. He's so unpopular, his party is so unpopular. So this guy, Emmanuel Macron, splintered from the Socialist Party and basically created his own party, and he's it. On the other side, he's referred to as a moderate centrist independent. Isn't that lovely? Isn't that just peachy? Isn't it so cute? Cool, moderate, centrist, independent. What could possibly be bad or threatening about this little guy? Moderate, centrist, independent. Then, the equivalent to Trump, or conservative over there, is Marine Le Pen. And she is always referred to as the extremist right-winger. So you have the moderate centrist independent, Macron, versus the extremist right-winger, Le Pen. He gets 23% of the vote. She got 21%. Some people thought she would get more than that because of the ISIS attack and the terrorism there. And the stock markets around the world are going nuts. They're very relieved because this Macron guy loves the European Union, does not want to get out of it. No Brexit in France, nothing near it is what the experts are saying. They already have this guy elected. In their world, it's just a formality on May 7th, the next round of elections. This guy's going to walk away with it. Le Pen is going to be defeated again, and France is going to be saved as an arch-liberal state run by a moderate centrist independent. This takes us to NBC News and Richard Engel on the Today Show today. And a little comment here about the French presidential election. And Mr. Engel here is shocked because the French establishment was rejected. Neither of these two candidates are from the establishment, except Macron, for all intents and purposes, is, but he's not. I mean, his party, the party he left is. But we'll go with the fact that neither establishment candidate is in the runoff. And here's the shock and dismay.
French voters rejected the establishment, and the ruling parties that have governed in France for decades were thrown out. Emmanuel Macron is now the frontrunner to be the next French president. He faces his polar opposite, Marine Le Pen, from the far right. Le Pen is anti-immigration, wants out of the EU, to drop the euro, and has been taking a page from the strategy book of President Trump. It's time for the French people to be free of the arrogant elites, she said, promising to close borders and stop terrorism. Analysts say Macron has the clearest path to victory, and that following Trump may have actually worked against Le Pen. There has been a trend in global politics toward nationalism, first with Brexit, then President Trump's election. France could be where that trend comes to an end.
All right, look, this is for another time, but I think this analysis that what's behind Trump's success is nationalism, and that's all it is, and that's all that explains it, way misses the point. It's way too narrow a term to try to fit Trump into. Nationalism, populism, they're elements, of course, but you cannot, in this country, you cannot ignore that one of the key reasons people voted for Trump was to stop Hillary Clinton. The woman was resoundingly opposed by a vast majority of people outside the state of California. She wasn't even that popular in her own party, but it was stop her and stop the left. The people of this country who feel like they're losing it and that it's losing them blame the Democrats for it. So Trump got all kinds of support for different reasons, but they want to narrowcast or narrowly peg him as this nationalist because it's so small-minded and it's so dangerous. This America First stuff, that's not good, they want to say. So the attempt to link Le Pen to Trump is, and her loss is an appeal here, an attempt by Richard Engel and the others in the drive-bys to say, Trump's losing too. Trump's losing his popularity. Trump, and he's not. That's what they can't come to grips with. Now we go to Paris. And I was aided in my attempt to understand this by reading an extensive piece by Christopher Caldwell, who writes for the Weekly Standard. He's a senior editor there. He's written reflections on the revolution in Europe, immigration, Islam, and the West. And he found a pretty good source in Paris, actually in France, a man by the name of Christophe Jouy. And he describes himself as a geographer and a housing consultant. But he's also obviously adept at demography and political science as well. And he has been investigating the tumult in France in an attempt to explain it and write books about it. And at the heart of his investigation is globalization. What is the impact in France of globalization? He says that it has brought inequalities unseen for 100 years. That it is benefiting a few, but the few that it's benefiting are the wealthy upper middle class elites who are perfectly fine with it. The upheaval and the discord and the inequalities are happening everywhere else throughout French society. Demographic upheaval, cultural disruption, and now the French are having an election to, in part, decide what to do about it. The focus here by Mr. Jouy, the geographer and housing consultant, says that French society has been split in two by metropolization. In 16 dynamic urban areas, such as Paris and Lyon and Marseille, Bordeaux, Nice, the very well-to-do upper-crust elitist areas, the world's resources have proved a profitable complement to those found in France. These urban areas are home to all of France's educational and financial institutions, as well as almost all of its corporations and the many well-paying jobs that go with them. Also in these 16 dynamic urban areas are the people, the entrepreneurs, the engineers, the CEOs, the fashion designers, the models, the film directors, the chefs, and other symbolic success stories who shape the country's tastes from its opinions and renew its prestige. In other words, the picture of France that the world sees is shaped by the people who live in these 16 urban areas. The elites, and not all of them are ruling class in governmental sense, but they're benefiting fine and dandy from globalization. And they control the media, they control the entertainment, and they control, just as in the United States, the same people control the method of influence over popular culture. But globalization has had no such effect on the rest of France. Cities that used to be as lively, although smaller, as lively and robust and economically successful as Paris, and these cities that way for hundreds of years are now deserts. They have been abandoned. They are haunted by empty storefronts and blighted downtowns. Think of it as the Rust Belt. You've got 16 cities in France that are doing fine and dandy. They are the cultural and media corporate headquarters that determine popular culture and opinion, journalism. The rest of the country is essentially forgotten and a Rust Belt. It used to be thriving, but it isn't any longer. And this man attributes the primary impacts of globalization for this current circumstance. But it gets more pronounced than that, because these people who've been displaced, who have been left out, have been replaced by people that are taken care of and provided for with much greater care and energy than native French. And these are immigrants, largely Muslim. Anyway, let's break there. I will continue. Won't take long to go through this, and you'll love it, I guarantee. Back in just a second here. We are back, and we are analyzing France and what the recent election there means and how it's similar to the United States. It's probably safe to say if the French had something like an electoral college, Marine Le Pen would win. But they don't. They're not a constitutional republic. They're not a representative republic. They're a quasi-parliamentarian democracy. It's a different circumstance than ours. Anyway, Christophe Jouy, the demographer or geographer, says that he doubts that any place exists in the new economy in France for working people as we've understood them. These would be waiters, waitresses, people that work in department stores, any type of retail level work. These jobs just don't exist. The city of Paris has become like London or New York and San Francisco. You have two groups of people that live there, millionaires and immigrants. And then you throw the tourists and students in there. There's no room, for example, in Paris for the median Frenchman economically. The French working class cannot work in Paris because they can't afford to live there. So they have been forced to leave not just Paris, but other urban areas. Immigration explains why. While economic opportunities for native median Frenchmen are lacking in Paris, they are also prospering for others. In other words, somebody's taking the jobs that native French working class people aren't taking because they can't afford to live there. Remember, the people taking the jobs live in public housing now. Journalists and politicians assume that the stratification of France's big cities is a result of a glitch in the workings of globalization. In other words, globalization, it's kind of like communism. It's perfect. We just haven't had the right people do it yet. Globalization is actually flawless. There's just a little glitch here because we just haven't quite perfected it. But that isn't the problem. The rich parts of France have failed to have what they're doing translate to everybody. It's still only working for a select few and not outside the cities at all. And fixing the problem involves coming up with a shortcut. Like, the globalists say, well, we just need free Wi-Fi, and that will make this working class more competitive, and it will raise their incomes. Do you hear that here? You hear, we need to get free Wi-Fi. We need to give this service or that service to the poor or disadvantaged, and that will launch them to a new economic stratosphere. They're saying the same thing in France. But he doesn't expect that if it ever happened to make a difference. It's a campaign thing. It's people use it to get elected, but it wouldn't really make any difference in changing the economic disintegration that is taking place. Again, in the mid-20th century, the French built 5 million public housing units, which now accounts for a sixth of all households. Public housing is 1/6 of all households in France. It's hideous looking, but it's more or less affordable. But its purpose has changed. It does not house native French workers for whom it was built. It now houses millions and millions of immigrants from North Africa who began to arrive in the 1960s. Between 2001 and 2011, the population of white Londoners, for example, fell by 600,000. And the current rate is happening in France as well. So where are those people going? Where are they going to work, and who are they voting for? And that's what the election really has turned out to be about. Okay, just a couple more short little bits from this story, what's going on in France, that I find fascinating and interesting, and then we move on to other things that are still happening out there. So don't go away, folks. We're coming right back. Having more fun than a human being should be allowed to have. It's Rush Limbaugh executing assigned host duties flawlessly. Zero mistakes. You know why? Because I do the assigning. And I don't assign myself stuff that I don't know or that I'm not good at. It's that simple. I am the business. I am the company. And it's great to have you here. 800-282-2882 if you want to be on the program. The email address, lrushbo@eibnet.com. Look, folks, the way to... EIB.us, that's right, .us. Sorry. lrushmo at eibnet.us is the email address. The comment that I made about the Electoral College, in France, what happens in the cities, the 16 largest urban areas, led, of course, by Paris, run the country. The people that don't live in the cities don't have a voice. They do in elections, but without the Electoral College, they have no strength, and they don't have an Electoral College. It's an amazing comparison in that regard. The big cities, Paris, Lyon, Marseille, which is the French crime capital, at least according to a TV show that I saw, it's called Marseille, and with Gerard Depardieu. You like that show? You watch that show on Netflix? Gerard Depardieu, and he's the mayor of Marseille. Yeah. At any rate, the point is, those cities now dictate to the rest of the country politically, culturally. It would be in this country as though if New York or San Francisco say what is, that's the way it's going to be in Wichita. Because there is no mechanism like we have here in the Electoral College, which actually promotes a greater and wider array of democratic representation. At any rate, the two remaining, to me, quite interesting aspects of this. So we've described here circumstance in France, which is almost parallel to the United States. Globalism and the shrinkage of Paris as a nation-state and primarily as a member of the global union. The people who benefit from that are those who live in the cities. They're doing very well. They're doing quite well. These are the people that hire gardeners and pool people and household staff and so forth. These are the people that basically have enough money to have employees themselves, nannies, things like this. But the people being hired for those jobs are not French. They are immigrants, because in the cities it's too expensive for working class French people to live. They don't earn enough money to even afford to be able to live there. So they have to go out into smaller cities and rural areas in France. They have been replaced by immigrants. And it's not whether it's illegal or not, it's just immigrants. And the vast majority are Muslims. And the vast majority of those don't have any living expense problems because they now live in all the public housing, which is 1/6 of all housing in France. Now, you might think that a situation like this would bother the French elites, just like you might think that in America, the plight of middle-class working people in America would bother and concern the Democrat Party. But you would be wrong. They don't care. The Democrat Party decided to get rid of the white working class as a member of its coalition because they didn't want to have to appeal to them. These are people that want to work. These are the people that want to be upwardly mobile. The Democrat Party's not interested in that. They're interested in a coalition of minorities that are willing to be dependents. And that's the way the Democrat Party here has rolled the dice. And in France, the elites have done much the same thing. French elites, this is what fascinated me, according to this researcher, Christophe Jouy. French elites have convinced themselves that their social supremacy, I mean, they know they're in the big clique. They know that they're the top dogs. And they have convinced themselves that that upper class status, that supremacy, has nothing to do with their economic strength. But instead, it's because they think they are good people. They think they are decent people. They're not racists, and they're not bigots, and they're not sexists, and they're not homophobes. They are decent people. They don't think, according to this guy, that their might, that their power, that their social standing has anything to do with the amount of money they have. The reason for this, according to Monsieur Jussuis, is that doing so allows these elites to present the losers of globalization as embittered people who have problems with diversity. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, you people that are opposed to illegal immigration, but you're racist, you're xenophobes, you're misogynists, you're all this stuff. You're bitter clingers, and who is it that gets to describe you this way? Why, the elites of New York and Washington and San Francisco and Los Angeles, they get to describe you this way. And they set themselves apart because their status in life has nothing to do with the money they have. They're better people than you. And it's the same identical circumstance in France. The elites believing that what sets them apart from everybody else in the country is that they're better human beings allows them to present the losers, the economic losers, as angry people who have problems with diversity. In other words, these elites in France say it's not our privilege that the French deplorables resent. It's the color of some of our employees' skin. So what they claim, people like this Macron guy and others of his ilk, what they claim is that people voting for Le Pen resent the fact that the elites are hiring people of color and minorities instead of them. And that makes it possible for them to categorize them as racists and bigots and what have you. French elites have a very colorful vocabulary for those who resist the open society. One need not say anything racist or hateful to be denounced as a member of the white xenophobic France or even as a fascist. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to do anything. You just have to not be in the elites. You just have to be middle income or poorer. If you express any discontent with the political system, you are cast as a white xenophobe in France. The circumstances are just so closely parallel here. And it's just an illustration that liberalism, socialism, wherever you find it, is identical. And it has its arguments, it has its strategic lexicon for how it separates and divides people. And it is hideous. And, of course, Le Pen is the equivalent of Trump, which means that she's a reprobate and absolutely horrible. And this is where that election is. And she got within 2 points of the guy. It's assumed he's going to win this in a slam dunk on the next round on May the 7th. By the way, it was this is just a cross the T, dot the I point. There's a story here at Market Watch. Most millennials don't want to pay for Netflix. And why is that even a news story? I mean, who wants to pay for anything? I mean, everybody would love it if things were free, but realistic people know that that's not possible. But more and more millennials do think that the things that entertain them should be free. They hate cable. They hate cellular companies. They despise Verizon. Verizon and Comcast are literally, but they love Netflix. They just love it. They think it should be free. And I first pointed this out in September of 2014. It was 3 years ago. Now it's a story at Market Watch. Most millennials don't want to pay for Netflix. Now, the reason it's a news story, this is supposed to scare Netflix. It's supposed to scare the entire telecommunications entertainment industry, because these are cord cutters. And if they don't want to pay for it, it's going to be a problem. What if they cancel? What if they just pirate? What if they steal it? What was Netflix and others going to do? And it is something that they do have to be concerned about. Now, the Daily Caller story, former Obama official, bureaucrats manipulate climate stats to influence policy. Now, you and I know that this happens. This isn't a big deal. But here we have testimony from an actual Obama regime official. A former member of the Obama administration claims that Washington, D.C. often uses misleading news releases about climate data to influence public opinion. You could plug in anything. Misleading news releases about nutrition, about Republicans, about Fox News. Anything to influence public opinion. Former Energy Department Undersecretary Stephen Koonin told the Wall Street Journal that bureaucrats within Obama's administration spun scientific data to manipulate public opinion. Have you heard the latest assertion from the left that is genuinely insane? It is that the most poisonous gas out there is not what Assad used, not sarin, CO2. Not kidding you. The left is now popular. Bill Maher picked it up and used it as though it were Bible gospel. In order to promote climate change, Bashar al-Assad, gassing his own people with sarin gas, was defended, in a sense. The left says, well, that's not the worst and most poisonous gas out there. The most poisonous gas is carbon dioxide, and it's being emitted in this country. The United States is poisoning more people with a poison gas than Assad could ever hope to. No, the planet could not exist without CO2. Humans couldn't exist. Plant life couldn't exist. Nobody could exist. It's carbon. Nobody could exist without carbon. Well, mammals. It's absurd. You exhale it. To ban CO2, this has been my problem with greenhouse gas emissions as a primary cause of global warming, climate change, what have you. We can't help it. We exhale CO2, and you know who breathes CO2? Well, I say who? Yes, it's plants and trees and grass, and then the magic of photosynthesis happens. We can't help it. To say that human beings behaving as we have no choice but to behave because of our creation are destroying the planet. Stop and think of that. And then add to it that this is a means of defending. Well, it's not actually defending Assad. It's trying to say the U.S. is worse, and we have no business criticizing Assad or anybody else who would use sarin gas because we're worse, because we're emitting more poison gas on innocent people than anybody else in the world ever has. Now, this is insane. This is not even, it's not arguable. It has no relevance. It has no foundation to it whatsoever. There's no science in this. It is just pure propaganda pornography. This, I'd call it political pornography, to get into things like this and to try to convince young skulls full of mush. You talk about a guilt trip. You already have these snowflakes out there that just are afraid of anything, even if it's Dr. Seuss, if it disagrees with them. And now you want to tell them that they're killing the planet. That's right where you want them. Now they'll do anything to save the planet. Vote Democrat, punish people that you tell them need to be punished, refusing to let them speak. I'm actually of the opinion that these people are going to crash and implode on themselves. I've gone back and forth on the proposition that the left is unbeatable because of their numbers and because of the media, and there simply is no massive counter to this. But at some point, this all has to collapse on itself because there's nothing that is providing the foundation for modern progressivism that is true, or very little. And what is true is being destroyed day in and day out, and it's being replaced with this inexplicable irrationality, such as the United States poisons more people than Bashar al-Assad ever could. I mean, what? It doesn't even compute. Now, the Democrat Party is trying to revitalize this, trying to reorganize itself. And Dick Durbin and Chuck Schumer and these guys are out there, and then Tom Perez now saying there is no home in the Democrat Party for pro-life Democrats. 28% of Democrats in polls say they're pro-life. And the current Democrat leadership is saying, stay away. You don't have a home here. We have no room in the Democrat Party for pro-life. The law is pro-abortion, and we always stand for the law. And if you are pro-life, you cannot be a Democrat today. They're honestly saying this, and proudly. And the only guy who gets the fact that they are in deep trouble and have a losing model is Bernie Sanders. Well, I take it Bernie Sanders and Keith Ellison are both on the same page. And I'm going to tell you who's going to hasten this collapse. Contrary to every ounce of conventional wisdom out there, it's going to be Donald Trump that hastens the collapse of these lunatics. We'll be back. Sit tight. The business, the company, the network. Rush Limbaugh here behind the golden EIB microphone. This is Catherine in Wichita. Great to have you on the program. How are you doing?
Hi, Rush. Thank you to you and Mr. Snerdley for taking my call.
You bet.
I have a question for you.
Yep.
Do you think the Tea Party has inspired an anti-establishment movement that's spreading to other nations like Brexit and the France election?
Well, actually, it may have provided, what's the word, confidence for others to behave accordingly. It may have given them strength, but I think, to be honest with you, I think what's driving movements like the Tea Party and Brexit is an absolute distaste for liberalism, a distaste for globalism. In the case of Brexit, and a distaste for dissolving the identity of the UK. In the United States, the Tea Party was specific. It was in opposition to out-of-control spending by the government and illegal immigration and the total lack of concern for anything to do with America. And it was very specific what the team. It was made up of people who'd never been in politics before. There wasn't a leader. There wasn't a manifesto. It was just naturally organic. And that's what scared people. The fact that there was no organization, that there was no platform, that there was no single leader that you could take out and destroy the movement. To the degree that it inspired others, I don't think there's any question about it, but I don't think it caused anything, because I think these anti-globalist sentiments, anti-liberal sentiments have been brewing and building for years. Harlow on the big island in Hawaii. Great to have you on the program, sir. How are you doing?
Excellent. Good morning.
Where are you on the big island? You in Hilo or are you over in Kailua Kona?
Actually, right between the two, down in Kau.
Well,
southern tip. If the island's a clock, I'm at about 6 o'clock.
Okay, gotcha. I'm familiar with it. I've actually played golf down there at a June Jones charity. Yes, I have, nearby.
Oh, neat.
So what's up?
I just had a comment about the sexual harassment stuff going on over at Fox. And it seems to me that maybe that whole sexual harassment thing as a business. I mean, Fox paid $13 million over 20 years for Bill. I'm curious how much Fox paid totally for this frivolous lawsuit stuff over the 20 years for other people, and what happened to them. I mean, if they released the stuff for Bill, why not release it for the others? And in that same context, wait
a second. How do you know, or are you just assuming that there are others and that Fox has paid an amount of money nobody knows and they haven't admitted to?
I think that this may be a huge business for unscrupulous people to get a couple of bucks out of wealthy people. You know, the money isn't an object for them. I mean, just to get something frivolous thrown out, it's worth it. And I can't believe a business like Fox that does, I don't know, $5 or $6 billion with tens of thousands of employees, and this is the only instance. And in that same vein, Rush, I'd like to know how much the New York Times paid in the last 20 years.
Okay, now you're helping me understand this. I wasn't quite sure where you're, like, how much is CNN paid?
Right, what did they pay over the last 20 years?
Well, that's as if we listen to the news, nobody's ever been sexually harassed anywhere in the media but Fox News.
Right, that doesn't make sense.
The only women that have ever been sexually harassed or bullied are at Fox News.
Bingo. It just doesn't make sense.
Pass the smell test, eh?
Exactly, and I was just wondering what you think about that, and well, kind of a silly question.
This is one of these areas.
Doesn't kind of put it in context.
This is one of these areas where I hate this. I feel constrained in saying things about this. I just do. It's a tricky area, and you know I understand the point that you're making. Why does this only happen at Fox? In the media, we know it's happened at other instances of like fire departments, places like that. But why in the media? Why only at Fox News? At least I don't remember any other prominent media figures said they've been sexually harassed at CNN or PMSNBC or NBC, ABC, CBS, PBS, Los Angeles Times, New York Times. It never happens. Like liberals, I guess we're to learn here, do not sexually harass anybody but themselves, which, of course, wouldn't be reported. As to what's happening at Fox, isn't it somewhat obvious, Harlow, what's happening there? Given your...
Well, yeah, and it is. I mean... obviously, with the sons coming in and that, one of the guys, I think his wife roomed with Marx in college or something. You can't get much more left.
No, it's not that. It's not. Let me hear. This is a great. No, he's talking about the Murdoch sons, the children. I mean, one of the Murdoch sons' wives. Roomed with Karl Marx. That's not possible. Karl Marx is like 200 years old. What he's thinking of is this. There are three Murdoch children by the first marriage. There may be more. There are three that I know. Two boys and one girl. It's James and Lachlan and Elizabeth. And Elizabeth's husband, and maybe ex-husband, I don't know, was Sigmund Freud's grandson. And I forget his first name, but he was virulently anti-Fox, hated Fox, lives in Britain, London, just despised it because it's conservative, just hated it. And one of the Murdoch sons' wives, I don't remember which one, was a ranking employee at the Clinton Global Initiative. You have family intrigue going on at Fox. You have corporate intrigue going on. You have generational change happening within the family at Fox. This is what is constraining me here, folks. There are certain things I think I know, but I'm not sure, and therefore I'm not confident enough to actually opine on them here. But it won't be long if my logical, progressive thinking, based on tidbits that I learn, is true, then Fox News, as you know it, has a lifespan. And it is, I think, already in the process of being modified and transformed very, very gradually. But it is going to happen. But I don't know. I feel like I ought to launch on this, and there's a part of me saying, don't do it yet. So I'm just going to wait. But as to the sexual harassment stuff, that's another. There's so much more going on with this than people know. It's like anything else, folks. If it's in the media, you have to bank on the fact that there's a whole lot that's not being reported and a whole lot that's being misreported for a reason, for a purpose. Like, I have my own theories about this. The problem is, if I announce them to you and if I'm right, well, then I've got attention that I don't really want. So we'll just watch it all unfold. But this is still a good question. When all of these allegations happen, it seems like they're automatically believed and accepted, and they're only happening at one place. Now, nobody is saying that. When you turn on CNN, nobody's raising that point. They just talk about it as though it's quite natural and normal that this kind of illicit behavior would be happening at Fox News and nowhere else. But that alone raises, or should raise, some questions about what really is going on here. And what I mean by, even if there is some, shall we say, less than above-board behavior going on, how is that being utilized to transform Fox away from what it is? Which, in other words, means maybe this isn't all that unpleasant for the powers that be. Maybe it's an assistant in helping them transform away from what it is into what they want it to become. Is that intriguing enough? I hope so, because I have to take a break. I'm going to be bailed out here by the programming format. Don't go away, folks. Fox News, just to give you an example, Fox News was just reporting, not CNN, not PMS, NBC. Fox News was just pushing a segment upcoming on how the special election in Montana is going to be the next proxy war for Trump, a national referendum on his popularity. An election in Montana. Thank you very much for being with us today, folks, as we get off to a rollicking and rocking start for a brand new week of broadcast excellence. Two things that I didn't get to today that I want to spend some time on. Trump's interview with the AP. I think it's really interesting. Some things in it I want to point out to you. And the details of the false and phony climate and environmental news an Obama administration official is admitting that they released. That and the trials and tribulations of the Democrat Party and whatever else happens between now and tomorrow. We'll see you then.